Hello everyone, 138 Veronica here, and I decided to do a dramatic reading over one of my speed arts. Sorry if I sound a little sick, but I have plenty of honey, so it's fine. I was inspired to do this by the videos by TheLethalBreed, and he is very good at it, and I'm putting links in the description below and at the end of this video. And a couple months ago, I went out with a best friend of mine to a used bookstore and picked up Golden Tales of America, selections by May Lambert Becker. And one story stood out to me because sometimes I feel like the main character, even though I'm much younger and I have a different set of creative skills. Today I'll be reading The Bedquilt. Of all the Elwell family, Aunt Methenville was certainly the most unimportant member. It was in the New England days, where an unmarried woman was an old maid at 20. At 40, she was everyone's servant, and at 60 had gone through so much discipline that she could need no more in the next world. Aunt Methenville was 68. She had never for a moment known the pleasure of being important to anybody. Not that she was useless in her brother's family. She was expected, as a matter of course, to take upon herself the most tedious and uninteresting part of the household labors. On Mondays, she accepted her share of the washing of the men's shirts, heavy with sweat and stiff with dirt from the fields and from their own hard-working bodies. Tuesdays, she never dreamed of being allowed to iron anything pretty or even interesting, like the baby's white dresses or the fancy aprons of her young lady nieces. She stood all day, pressing out a tiresome, monotonous succession of dishcloths and towels and sheets. In preserving time, she was allowed to have none of the pleasant responsibility of deciding when the fruit had cooked long enough, nor did she share in the little excitement of pouring the sweet-smelling stuff into the stone jars. She sat in a corner with the children and stoned cherries incessantly, or hulled strawberries until her fingers were dyed red to the bone. The Elwells were not consciously unkind to their aunt. They were even in a vague way fond of her. But she was so utterly insignificant a figure in their lives that they bestowed no thought whatsoever on her. Aunt Methenville did not resent this treatment. She took it quite as unconsciously as they gave it. It was to be expected when one was an old maid dependent in a busy family. She gathered what crumbs of comfort she could from their occasional careless kindness and tried to hide the hurt which even yet pierced her at her brother's rough joking. In the winter, when they all sat before the big hearth, roasting apples, drank mulled cider, and teased the girls about their beaux and the boys about their sweethearts, she shrank into the dusty corner with her knitting, happy if the evening passes without her brother saying, with crude sarcasm, "Ask your Aunt Methenville about the beau that used to come sparking her," or, "Methenville, how wasn't you when you were in love with Abel Cummings?" As a matter of fact, she had been the same at 20 as at 60, a quiet, mouse-like little creature, too timid and shy for anyone to notice, or to raise her eyes for a moment, who wished for a life of her own. Now, to explain it, this section, that's kind of me. I like to watch my family and listen to them talk. I'm not really much of a people talker, but I know I'm not saying that I'm just shuffled off in a corner and I'm not neglected or forced to do unpleasant things. No, my family loves me very much. And I love them right back, so no. But I do a lot of knitting, as you all know. Her sister-in-law, a big, hearty housewife, who ruled indoors with an autocratic sway, as did her husband on the farm, was rather kind in an absent, offhand way to the shrunken little woman. And it was through her, misspelling, that Methenville was able to enjoy the one pleasure of her life. Even as a girl, she had been quite clever with her needle in the way of patching bedquilts, more than she could ever learn to do. The garments which she made for herself were the most lamentable affairs, and she was humbly grateful for any help in the bewildering business of putting them together. But in patchwork she enjoyed a tepid importance. She could really do that as well as anyone else. During years of devotion to this one art, she had accumulated a considerable store of quilting patterns. Sometimes the neighbors would send over and ask Miss Methenville for such and such a design. It was with an agreeable flutter at being able to help someone that she went to the dresser, in a bare little room under the eaves, my last name, and extracted from her crowd portfolio the pattern desired. She never knew how her great idea came to her. Sometimes she thought she must have dreamed it. Sometimes she even wondered, reverently, in the phraseology of the weak crazy meetings, if it had not been sent to her. She never admitted to herself that she could have thought of it without other help. It was too great, too ambitious, too lofty a project for her humble mind to have conceived. Even when she finished drawing the design with her own fingers, she gazed at it incredulously, not daring to believe that it could indeed be her handiwork. At first it seemed to be her only like a lovely but quite unreal dream. She did not think of putting it in execution. So elaborate, so complicated, so beautifully difficult a pattern could only be for the angels in heaven to quilt. But so curiously does familiarity accustom us even to the very wonder of things, that as she lived with this astonishing creation of her mind, the longing grew stronger and stronger to give it material life with her nimble old fingers. She gasped at her daring when this idea first swept over her, and put it away as one does a sinfully selfish notion. But she kept coming back to it again and again. Finally, she said compromisingly to herself that she would make one square, just one part of her design, to see how it would look. Accustomed to the most complete dependence on her brother and wife, she dared not to even this without asking Sophia's permission. With a heart full of hope and fear thumping furiously against her old ribs, she approached the mistress of the house on churning day, knowing with the innocent guile of a child that the countrywoman was apt to be in a good temper while working over the fragrant butter in the cool cellar. Sophia listened absently to her sister-in-law's halting, hesitating petition. "Why, yes, Methabel," she said, leaning far down in the huge churn for the last golden morsels. "Why, yes. Start another quill if you want to. I've got a lot of pieces from the spring sewing that'll work in real good." Mathilde tried honestly to make her see that this would be no common quilt, but her limited vocabulary and her emotions stood between her and expression. At last Sophia said, with a kindly impatience, "Oh, there, don't bother me. I never could keep track of your quilting patterns anyhow. I don't care what pattern you go by." With this overwhelming, although unconsciously generous permission, Methamel rushed back to the steep attic stairs to her room, and in a joyful agitation began preparing for the work of her life. It was even better than she hoped. By some heaven-sent inspiration, she had invented a pattern beyond which no patchwork quilt could go. She had but little time for her incessant round of household drudgery for this new and absorbing occupation, and she did not dare sit up late at night lest she burned too much candle. It was weeks before the little square began to take on a finished look, to show the pattern. Then Methabel was in a fever of impatience to bring it to completion. She was too conscious to shirk even the smallest part of her share of the work of the house, but she rushed through it with a speed which left her panting as she climbed to the little room. This seemed like a radiant spot to her as she bent over the innumerable scraps of cloth, which already in her imagination arranged themselves in the infinitely diverse pattern of her masterpiece. Finally, she could wait no longer, and one evening ventured to bring her work down beside the fire where the family sat, hoping that some good fortune would give her a place near the tallow candles on the mantelpiece. She stood in the last corner of the square, and her needle flew in and out with inconceivable rapidity. No one noticed her, a fact which filled her with relief, and by bedtime she had but a few more stitches to add. As she stood up with the others, the square fluttered out of her trembling old hands and fell on the table. Sophia glanced at it curiously. "Is that the new quilt you've been getting on?" she asked with a yawn. "It looked like a real pretty pattern. Let's see it." Up to that moment, Methamel had labored in the purest spirit of disinterested devotion to an ideal, but as Sophia held her work towards the candle to examine it, she exclaimed in amazement and admiration. She felt an astonished joy to know that her creation would stand the test of publicity.